get the presentation started. We want to thank everyone for joining us today on the Security, Compliance, and Integrity Blueprint for helping manage in a very dangerous IT environment, as we're all very aware of here today. We'll go ahead and get the presentation started. Let's walk through the agenda briefly. Just a couple of points. I'm Tom Leahy. I head up sales and business development with SureShield. We provide technology solutions to help organizations protect their valuable IT assets by helping identify areas of vulnerabilities and, more importantly, helping you fix those. We assist in helping with compliance requirements that all usually come around these, and then also helping make sure that bad actors are not operating in your environment. On the call with me today is Sanjay Kumar. He's our CEO. And both of us come from a security and compliance background. We also have our CTO, Chandi Bilagu, on, who will help answer any technical questions you may have. And obviously, with the things that are going on today, many of us and all of us are very aware of a more heated and very dangerous cyber environment that is going on out there. As we witnessed just recently, the attacks that happen in Ukraine and are going to be happening in other areas were not just physical, but a very well coordinated cyber attack, where obviously known issues in those environments were exploited very quickly as a means to attack both from an asset level and then at a physical level, unfortunately. So we'll talk a little bit about today's cyber landscape, some statistics that continue to get heightened, and then we will discuss things that need to be done. Any one of us, no matter what kind of company we're working with or operating with, critical keys to protect our valuable information. We'll touch a little bit on the costs of poor performance, which many of us are sure are aware of. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can help you in that preparation and in that ongoing vigilance. We'll give you a very brief platform product overview, and then we'll get into Q&A. We will be taking a poll during this presentation towards the end for any of you that may have interest in trialing all or any one of our solutions. We will make that available to you, and you will be followed up on that. Just also as a note, the presentation here, the content today, as well as this webinar presentation, will be available to all of you who participate here. So keep an eye out for a message that will go out, and you'll have links to that information. For those of you that express interest in leveraging or trying any one of the products, we will go ahead and have a personal follow-up with you as well. And it's obvious, we've all seen today that the cyber landscape we're really in a cyber war that's taking place right now. And it's obviously much more exposed with Russia, but we know that this is happening with all of our adversaries that we have out there, whether it be the Iranians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, that this method of attack, as we all know, it's far easier. It puts companies on an even scale, meaning as long as you have enough experts that know how to do this, you don't have to rely completely on pure brute force and people. The Russian military is actually experiencing that right now. While they have a lot of folks, they're having difficulty actually combating the people that they're coming after. And it makes it much easier to create chaos and havoc by doing it behind the scenes or doing it in a methodology that doesn't expose your people to harm, and thus also can cause some very, very significant problems. So needless to say, these most recent this most recent crisis has even further pointed out the need and the warnings to all of us about being ready for these types of attacks to come. Not only here in the United States, but of course, across the globe as well. And really, what should you be doing right now to prepare for those? Sanjay, I think it's kind of it was an interesting, opportune time as we got ready to do this presentation, that an article that he wrote just recently was published. And maybe you can just give a quick synopsis of what the details of this this particular article you just recently wrote are about.
Sure, Tom, thanks. No, the article, as Tom mentioned, just recently, just last week, got published. It's all highlighting how attacks have become that much more far-reaching and really very much orchestrated and sophisticated in the way that they are targeting the devices and endpoints out there, right? And the impact of this is not just for the US, but it's really international, is far-reaching. And it all boils down to the degree of footprint that we have for the networks and operational environments that we have, as well as the diligence or the hygiene, cyber hygiene that we basically practice, right? It boils down to some of all of that. And the article goes into how we might be best able to perhaps address the dangerous environment that we live in today.
Yes, and it just, I think also, as all of us, if any of us who've been around for a while, if you look at the progression of these issues, 10 years ago, it was some phishing attacks, or it was a disruption of service type thing that was happening as people became more familiar with how to navigate these environments. And, obviously today, the dangers around this are so much more critical, meaning the potential to shut down critical infrastructure, to prevent you from getting electricity, from contaminating your water systems, these kind of things, that they become that much more heightened, that much more sophisticated, and also that much more of a reason to implement controls that will help prevent this. There's plenty of data today to show that the degree of focus at the executive level, this is now becoming like one of the top 3 to 5 priorities in any organization that does anything related towards, I think there's none of us that are not exposed to the internet. And if we're exposed that way, we have the potential for those vulnerabilities. So just in terms of some of the stats that have been, that are out there today, and again, data has shown that a lot of the attacks are not just looking at big companies, but they're actually focusing in on small to medium businesses as well. Oftentimes because they don't have as many of the good protections in place. So none of us are exempt from the potentials that are coming here. A lot of the things, breaches that are happening today actually are caused by human error. And that human error doesn't just mean that someone's clicked on the link. It could mean that something wasn't configured properly and set up in a network environment properly, and therefore it became exposed, that folks have not been properly trained on understanding how to handle certain things. Given this, with the heightened awareness, those who are in the profession know and feel that they're understaffed. So they don't have enough people and bodies and knowledge that can help with these processes. The cost of the ransomware attack has increased to 4.4 million. It will continue to increase. Beyond that, we actually just got off a call with some folks we know in the cyber insurance space who were pointing out a case that they had where that ransom was close to $10 million. And being more vigilant about any companies that they're going to insure, making sure that they have proper tools in place to provide that type of protection. Oftentimes, these breaches are caused by trusted partners. Again, not that those trusted partners did anything intentionally, but they may not have had the proper systems and processes set up that made it easy to exfiltrate and get into systems. And we'll continue to see that ransomware industry increase. And obviously the pandemic itself brought on a lot of new issues, not just with the nature of the remote workers, but obviously in times of difficulties and crisis, there's often a lot of bad players who try to take advantage of that. So you've seen the same, healthcare has been hit significantly hard by this because a lot of the focus of resources moved to taking care of people as opposed to protecting, just not having the resources to protect critical data or to exploit situations where there's monies that are going to help in recovery and there's bad actors that are taking advantage of that. So really, in terms of the kind of three pillars of protection that need to be enforced and installed in any kind of an organization, it starts with security, ensuring that the data in your systems are protected, that you're looking at vulnerabilities and you're doing processes to do that, and then you're more importantly utilizing and leveraging remediation so that you can lower your risk profile. And that means you need to be aware of all the new vulnerabilities that are coming out at any given point. That's not necessarily an easy piece to do. On the other side of that, beyond the internal security, is obviously making sure that the integrity of the vendors that you work with, the people that are working within your environment are good, and that there's a number of databases out there today that have what you might call banned providers or vendors, people that are not allowed to conduct business with companies. And sometimes those aren't easy to identify. So in making sure that the integrity of your ecosystem is in place. And then this all really wraps into areas of compliance. We oftentimes start with compliance because we know it's something that's over our head and is kind of a stick that if we don't do it, we are subject to losing contracts or losing an accreditation or things like those natures. But really, compliance is meeting what might be called a federal or an industry requirement in order to conduct your business. But really, security and integrity is what assures that you are in compliance. And of course, we don't need these to point out again what the costs of poor performance are. There's lots of new vulnerabilities that are being introduced. Many of you might be familiar now with what they call the CISA exploits because of the nature of how critical and how important and difficult some of these things are. They are now the federal government, the CISA office is issuing almost on a daily basis a known exploit report. And those are reports that go off to all the federal agencies with specific timelines and processes for fixing these problems. Again, they're also pushed out to industry because there's really no difference. The issues that you have at a government agency are no different than you have in the private sector. So while they can't enforce it, they highly encourage that companies adopt and look at those exploits. And I believe just last week, there were almost 90 new ones, which was a big number. You're typically seeing 10 to 15 that are released, but obviously in lieu of the heightened expected attacks that are coming, there's more coming out in helping that. So what we actually help companies with is understanding those exploits. So how can, in lieu of all of that, and of course it's not the greatest, most fun stuff to talk about, but the fact is improving our cyber hygiene and making sure whether we are a small company with 1 or 2 people or a large organization, the fundamentals of what needs to be in place are the same. And SureShield can help assist in that in a variety of different ways. And we'll touch base on that briefly and actually show you some tools that can help you with that process. Obviously, on the security side, there are ways in which you need to look at things like understanding where you may have already been breached. Those are areas around the dark web, meaning where have credentials maybe already been compromised that you don't know. Where do you want to put maybe some extra layers of protection on data? You know within your environment, just like within a home, you have lots of different assets. And while you want to protect the perimeter of that house and prevent people from coming in, if they were to be able to get in, you may have some valuables you want to make sure that you're even more protected. And so we have solutions that can help put extra layers of protection on critical data you may have in your environment. For those of you who are dealing with the government, that means helping make sure that CUI is well protected, or credit card data is well protected, or PHI data that you're operating from a healthcare provider standpoint has extra layers of protection on that. And then, we can assist you with the vulnerability management and remediation. We can take a picture of what your environment looks like on a regular basis and help you understand what vulnerabilities there may be, what the risk and the nature of that is from a criticality standpoint, and more importantly, how to fix it and remediate it and be able to come back and see after you've done that process what impact that's had. And again, this is continuous because there's literally thousands of new vulnerabilities that are being introduced every day. We have compliance solutions that can marry to any, there are a lot of different compliance frameworks. If you're in the government, you're now dealing with NIST and 800-171 and CMMC. If you're a healthcare provider, you have HIPAA. If you're both, you're having to deal with both of those. There's ISO, there's lots of different security frameworks and compliance frameworks that may be important for you to be in compliance with in order to operate your business. And we help you in terms of being able to manage that, to see where your gaps may be, and also introducing what I would call technology and automation tools that can automate a good portion of that process. So oftentimes within a vulnerability scan or a dark web review, we can point out and identify areas of compliance or non-compliance in it, as it relates to a particular compliance framework. And then lastly, as mentioned before, we have solutions that can help manage and look at the integrity of your ecosystem. That would be your vendors, your contractors, your employees that are working within an organization. If you're in healthcare, there's what they call the sanctions and exclusions databases that have to be reviewed regularly to make sure you're not working with a bad player. And if you are, you're in a lot of, beyond it being bad for you, you're in a lot of deep trouble with the government around that. They've recently released what they call the McCain Act, preventing anybody that does even any little piece of business with the government from utilizing technology that they've banned that is Chinese related telecommunication. Well, if you're a provider, you're oftentimes understanding all the assets that you have within an environment can be quite difficult. We provide ways to help make that simple by looking at that environment and then being able to marry those up against the databases where things are maybe banned. And within that playbook, again, in terms of how we help is on the security side, making sure that you're aware of any emerging and current vulnerabilities and helping you remediate those, to help you make sure that you are compliant on any of the frameworks you need to work with, And, more importantly, on the business side of it, I wouldn't say more importantly, beyond your protection, on the business side of it, making sure that you have the proper tools in place to ensure that you're going to win new contracts, because more and more of those will start coming out with provisions around cyber hygiene that needs to be in place in order for you to be awarded an agreement. And even if you're in current agreements, there's many that will start coming back out with those requirements. And doing it in a way that deals with the limited resources that you may have or organizations have. There's shortages in all areas, and helping make the workflow around this more easy. So how can we help you even on the front end of this in the beginning? SureShield can help you run a dark web scan. So we can do an initial scan to help you understand what credentials may be compromised today. We can run initial compliance assessments across our security frameworks to help you understand what gaps you may have with any particular type of compliance environment you're working with. We can run initial vulnerability scans. And again, all of these are ongoing, but in terms of things we can help you with, if you're just even trying to get started or don't know, all of these tools can provide the guidance to help you look at, for instance, vulnerabilities, understand what security issues you may have, and they'll then help guide you on how to remediate those. Whether you're a direct provider or you are a provider who's helping others, for instance, a managed security provider or a chief information security officer organization that's helping other organizations with that. And again, we can help eliminate any potential bad actors in your environment, and doing this in what we call a continuous and regular methodology, so you know what's going on at any given point in time. So I'm going to pause here briefly and just give you a very cursory overview of the different environments or product offerings that we have and how they can help you and automate that process with you. For those who are participating as presenters, can you just let me know that you're able to see my screen okay? Are you all seeing me in the Acme Pro Services and on the control screen? Great. So I'm only going to touch briefly on the solutions and how they can help. In this particular example, I have turned on what I would call compliance frameworks. And these frameworks that we're going to look at are specifically related to some of the Department of Defense initiatives, keeping in mind we can do it across any different type of framework. But in this environment, they're looking at their compliance controls, the policies related to those controls, and then they've also leveraged what I would call our security and vulnerability scanning tool that allows them to identify within this environment what particular assets are being looked at, what services are being looked at, and most importantly, what are the different vulnerabilities that may be existing on those and how to remediate them. And you'll notice, as I mentioned before, we've taken the extra step to help folks, because of the critical nature of the CISA known exploits, to pull those out and highlight those, as well as a component of vulnerabilities if you're looking at things that you want to attack immediately. But if I were to click into these, it very quickly shows me, for instance, the different types of frameworks that I may be working with. In this example, as I mentioned, we've pulled in the DoD related frameworks. Currently, those who have contracts with the DoD need to comply with the NIST 800-171. And as many of you know, there's a new initiative being rolled out called the Cyber Maturity Model. And companies are going to have to get certified on that model. The level 2 of that model, as well as the NIST 800-171 marry. So they're the exact same, they're just slightly different in terms of how you answer the questions, but the basic content of those is the same. And so to help again on limiting the resource strap around that, what we've done is we synchronize those together. So if you are answering, for instance, questions related to NIST, in this case, I've gone in and looked at an access control question. We provide a lot of guidance on how to answer that question. So for instance, you can see down here, if I'm leveraging these, I can look at what that question is, but then get tremendous amounts of guidance on how do I best go about addressing this, answering this, and proving that I am compliant with this. Those include things like best guidance practices, implementation guidelines, how do I put this in place, the policies and procedures related, supplemental guidance that may help me in understanding how to do these kind of things as well. And all of this kind of work can be distributed across the people within your own organization to help you go through this, and then more importantly, be able to come back and see from a reporting perspective how you are complying with these different issues. So we have a lot of different reports that you can run once you have begun to do these assessments to show you where you are, where you stand, how you're performing, and more importantly, what you need to do to get yourself fully compliant. What are the things I need to do to close those gaps? For those of you that are operating in a government-related environment, particularly with the DoD, you're familiar with reporting requirements they have currently under NIST. That includes the submission of a system security plan, a plan of action and milestone report, and also a report on the NIST assessment score, which is a computation of results based upon your levels of compliance with that particular security protocol. So all of that output is provided for you and can also be made available to schedule and send out to others that you may need to show and have awareness of this within your system. It can also output this into different means for you to report on to folks you need to send this to, whether that's in Word, in Excel, in PowerPoint, in PDF. So very simple, I would say relatively simple and easy to use tools to assure your compliance processes and profiles. Now I'm going to come back out briefly and also point out, as we mentioned, the ability to run both at the point of starting and continuously vulnerability assessments and scans. And we do this, what we've done is we've enhanced an industry-leading vulnerability scanning utility provided by a company called Rapid7, one of the industry leaders in this area. But what we've done is we've taken it and I would say simplified it in terms of implementation and in terms of how to utilize the information that comes out of that to help you quickly pinpoint where you need to focus your efforts for remediation and vulnerability activity. So in this particular demo environment that we're in, this is showing me a company that has over 272 host assets that are being looked at and analyzed, and telling me that within those assets, we have 3,000 different services that are running on those and over 10,000 different vulnerabilities. In a similar manner, I can click into any one of these and begin to filter on my data in any way that I see fit. So if I wanted to just come down and say, you know what, I'm interested in just looking at the most critical issues that I have within my environment, it will tell me what those assets are because I clicked on the asset nature of this. I can go into that particular asset. And as I mentioned before, this is something that can be scheduled to be run on a continuous nature. I can always see what impact has happened as I've run different scans at different points of time. And more importantly, not only understand what the services that are running on here, what are the applications that are running on here, the vulnerabilities, most important, the plan and the remediations that need to be done to fix these problems. And again, I can go back and look at that on more of from a micro level. So when we've run these, not everyone can always attack every single issue or vulnerability they have. Ideally, what you want to do is go and look for what you're going to get your biggest bang of the buck for. So similarly, there are lots of different reports that can be run on these solutions to help you understand things like, for instance, what are my top remediations that need to be done? If I were to apply, let's say, the top 20 remediation suggestions, what impact would that have on my overall vulnerabilities? And again, as I point, you can do reporting at both a macro or micro level. If I see a critical vulnerability, I can know what impact will have if I just click and fix that one. But in this case, it's pulling up for me what we would call, for instance, a top remediation report. It'll summarize that information to tell me, based upon what I've asked, of my 242 assets, it's telling me if I wanted to get to the top 20 remediations, I'd go and take care of these assets, apply that on those assets, and if I applied that on those assets, what would be the impact on my overall risk mitigation? And a lot of different nice ways that you can even follow that over time, that based upon applying these different remediations, what impact will that have on my risk profile, on reducing risk, and also, how much time is this going to take me to do this, so that I can focus my effort and time to go after the things that are going to be the most critical in nature to me. Again, a continuous tool, because you could schedule these to run at any given point in time, and when they see abnormalities, they will point those and highlight those out to you as well. Before I finish up on touching on a couple of more of the products, we've usually tend to sometimes run out of time, and we've typically have a lot of folks that are interested in trialing some of these solutions. So I'm going to launch our poll while I show a couple of other pieces here. For any of you that are participating, if you do have an interest in taking a look at any of these products, it's going to ask you if so, and then which ones may be of particular interest to you. I'll begin that poll, and then we can let that run in the background as we approach to getting towards the end of the presentation. You can come in and please go ahead and answer into that poll what you might like to use or what you might find useful to you, and we will schedule time for that to happen. So while I'm continuing to launch that, I'll just touch on a couple of other solutions that are used for, one, identifying. As we mentioned, we have ways in which we can go in and run an endpoint tool that will allow you to identify critical data in your environment, whether that be CUI data, whether that be PHI data, whether that be credit card data. It will go out into your endpoints and identify, first of all, those endpoints, and then what sensitive data resides on those endpoints, and what type of format that data resides. And it will also give me information in terms of the exfiltration, the movement of that data as well. So you can see I've got a kind of a sensitive data file screen here. I have 139 devices that have been scanned. It's showing me there's critical data that's out there on a whole bunch of different items and things. And you can see again on the filtering side of this, I can go ahead on in and even filter if I wanted to just narrow it down to particular types of data that I am looking at. So in this case, I've said I want to filter and look at what particular CMMC related CUI data I may have. Or I might want to say, show me all the credit card or the PHI data that may be running on my systems. Very easy to get all of that. And more importantly, again, not just to identify that, but then to allow you to write rules and how that data can be moved, preventing it from moving to places that it should not go to. And that's how that particular solution operates. And then lastly, we do have some tools that can allow you to do the monitoring, for instance, of 889B compliance. And I don't think this one actually has some data in there, so I could try. Let's jump here. You can see in this particular view, it's showing me not only within my own network, but also within my supply chain network. What companies, as I mentioned before, this particular act requires that you not work with any type of Chinese companies that have certain telecommunication equipment. So the database itself will show you all the banned vendors that are in that database. And what we do then is automatically run that against the assets you have to tell you very quickly and rapidly whether you have any banned vendors that are in that environment. Keeping again in mind, trying to do this today or to try to identify your sanctioned employees or physicians in an environment are extremely difficult if you don't have automation tools to help you with that as well. So that's a very quick overview around some of the solutions that we have to help you in moderating in this particular environment. Sorry. So with that, we'll go ahead and summarize and get ready to take any questions that you have. Obviously, again, in today's environment, again, even more heightened that these attacks are going to continue to increase. And no matter who you are, you need to be, planning to prevent these things from happening and putting effective tools in place to make sure that you have that and you're protecting your assets in your environments. There won't be any company that's going to be exempt from this. In the past, maybe the focus was on larger organizations because of what they could get out of them. We're going to now see that that will be happening at what I would call a macro and micro level. And because of that, compliance requirements and enforcement will obviously continue to increase. And given the fact that we are not moving away from a digital age, we're actually increasing that. The more that there is, the more new criminals and more new challenges that will be entered. And addressing them will be, quite difficult if you don't have good technology tools to help you in that process. So again, we've continued to leave that poll open. I can see that there's a number of you that are indicating an interest in trialing out some of these solutions. And I'll leave this poll open as well till we get to the end and let you know that we'll be following up with you. But please, we are coming to the conclusion of the presentation. We'd like to open it up now for any questions that you may have. And if you can just go to the Q&A section of our presentation, you'll see on the Zoom, usually if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see an area for Q&A. And it's there that you can go ahead on and ask any questions that you may have. So we'll open that up to you to begin that process. I see a number of folks are showing primary interest, at least right now, in the security and vulnerability tools, as well as the compliance and auditing tools. And I see a raised hand. I don't know if there's a question, Chandi, that you can have. I'm not sure what the question might be. Or
it must be a mistake.
Great. If you do have questions, please go into the Q&A around that. The Q&A, you should see a little tab that's open for Q&A. And I do know that there's been some folks that have asked. Okay. And Chandi, maybe you can type the answer, but I'll go ahead and answer this live as well. One person is asking, what's the time and level of effort for implementation? I'm assuming that means for our solution. It is actually quite simple and easy. That was one of our kind of primary mantras, was to make this extremely robust, but making the time for putting this in place relatively easy to implement. So this is a cloud-based solution. It's very easy for us and for our service providers to identify what it is that particular client is looking for. And really, in a matter of minutes, we can activate those solutions, whatever that solution may be for them. So the activation implementation time is almost seamless. Of course, we provide help in helping you navigate and work with the solution, but turning it on and getting it ready to be made available is super simple. And Chandi's answering another question. While he's doing that, I'm going to answer it as well. You know, is this appropriate for small businesses? It doesn't matter the size of your business, particularly if you're a DoD contractor, you're going to need to comply with this. We have actually a few folks after our last session that were two-person companies that are finding working with the compliance and security solution to be extremely beneficial to them. And they often have downstream providers that they're working with within their ecosystem, and they're recommending this out. If you are a contractor, it doesn't matter the size of your company, you're going to need to comply with NIST 800-171 today and the CMMC guidelines in the future if you wish to continue to operate and get those contracts. So we find that this is a very simple and easy, and our folks like you have been telling us it's what they love is that it's really simple and easy to get up and running, as was asked by the previous question. And yes, it's appropriate for companies of any and all sizes. Any other questions? We're still, I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves on time, so hopefully we'll be able to buy you back a little time as well. But please, while we still do have the poll open as well, let me know if there are any other questions that folks have. And I don't see this question being asked, but I'll go ahead, and because we hear it a lot in other presentations, questions around how are things priced. And actually to the person who's presenting the question, yes, it's scaled based upon the size of your company for the most part. So there's certain solutions, the security and vulnerability tools are really based upon the number of assets in an environment we need to scan. So there will be a little bit different price for a smaller company as opposed to a larger company. Our compliance related auditing tools are extremely cost effective and priced appropriately based upon your sizes as well. But we're talking in the areas of hundreds of dollars, perhaps a month, not thousands or multi-thousands. But compliance frameworks are based upon the frameworks that are being activated for a client. We are bundling CMMC and NIST 800-171 together, so you're really buying two for the price of one. And that's how those particular products, I can provide more detail for folks if they have an interest in that follow-up. Our security and vulnerability tools are based upon the number of assets we need to address, and the same with our, what I would call data protection tools, the number of endpoints that we need to reside on in order to run those scans. And so again, as to maybe to the point of that is, yes, costing for the most part is scaled based upon the size of the organization, with some limitations and caps on that as well. So we'll hold on just another minute for any other questions that folks may have. If not, as we indicated at the beginning of the presentation, you should be expecting a follow-up email that will have links to the presentation, the content of this presentation, if you need to share that with others, as well as the links to the recording of the webinar. There are folks on here that have indicated maybe later you'd have an interest in trying these. For all of those who are presenting here, regardless of whether you're interested now or in the future or not at all, we'll continue to keep you informed of things that are going on, obviously, in these environments, as well as new offerings and items that can help you to improve your cyber hygiene, available through SureShield, should you have interest at a future date as well. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and bring the presentation to a conclusion. Again, thank you all for participating. We wish you the best in preparation and continued ongoing vigilance to protect yourselves, your businesses. Obviously, we think about the folks over in Ukraine that are dealing with a very difficult situation right now, and hope that, in the not too distant future, there'll be some peaceful resolution to these unpeaceful acts that have taken place right now. So again, we wish you all the best. We appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us for this, and we'll look forward to following up with you all and hopefully having an opportunity to work with you. Thanks again, and appreciate everybody attending the session. We'll go ahead and conclude.